This is an audio narrated slide example. The slide you see here is in this only as a preface. What this slide tells you is that slides are better off with pictures rather than words. Especially if you just read words to people, it's very boring and forgettable. Pictures are what slides are all about. And so this slide set contains pictures and no words at all. In fact, you wouldn't really get the meaning of the slides if I didn't narrate it to tell you. Let's pretend I'm conducting a class called ABC 123 Cinema Plot Development, and one aspect of a plot development is developing a character. I'm going to take a look at two different movies here, and a character from each. Since you've probably already seen these movies, you'll be able to relate to the fact that the character of one of them changes in the movie, whereas the other one, the character doesn't. In both cases, they start out as the bad guys in the movies. Here we have some scenes from It's a Wonderful Life, Frank Capra's movie in the 1940s, set in the town of Bedford Falls, probably Pennsylvania. And I'm going to narrate these as I highlight pieces of the slides for you. So what I've done is simply take the same slide and duplicate it, but then add some graphic emphasis to each one. Who is the bad guy in It's a Wonderful Life? It happens to be Mr. Potter. Mr. Potter is the rich man in town, the banker, and he's very stingy with his money personally, and when he loans it out to people, he wants it paid back, and he won't loan it to people who he considers a bad risk. He also owns a lot of rental property in town that he probably charges too much for, which tends to keep people from being able to buy their own homes. Who's the good guy in It's a Wonderful Life? The good guy is George Bailey, played by Jimmy Stewart. He inherits a business when his father dies. The business is a small savings and loan. They call it a building and loan at that time. Depositors place money in the building and loan, and they loan it out at reasonable terms to people to help them build their homes or buy homes. He's actually a thorn in Potter's side because his activities remove renters from Potter's slums and put them in their own homes, which is very much in keeping with the American dream of home ownership. Now let's take a look at another character. This is Clarence. Clarence looks like an old man, but he's actually an angel that gets sent down to help George through a tough time in his life when Potter gets a good chance to ruin him. What happens at that point where Clarence helps George Bailey out? Let's take a look at the very last scene on this slide. By the end of the movie, the man at the left of this circled slide, Uncle Billy, manages to lose $8,000 that he's supposed to take to Potter's bank to deposit because the building and loan actually keeps its money in another bank, which is Potter's bank, the only other bank in town. Uncle Billy manages to stick the money he's supposed to put into the savings and loans account. He sticks it in a newspaper, and he manages to get that newspaper into the hands of Potter, and he doesn't realize that's where his $8,000 went. But Potter knows, and Potter isn't an honest man. He's not going to give it back. He wants to use it as a tool to ruin George Bailey and put the building and loan out of business. And he's just going to keep the $8,000 even though he knows who the rightful owner is. So by the end of the movie, George Bailey's friends bail him out. And so many people in town donate money to make up for the lost funds. It keeps George Bailey out of trouble, but it shows him how much he's appreciated by everybody who he's helped. So it gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling. Very nice movie for Christmas. I like the colorized version myself. The main point of our discussion is the development of the characters. George Bailey starts out as a good man, and he winds up being an even more appreciative one at the end. Potter, unfortunately, never seems to change. He starts out as a mean man, and he ends up as a mean man. Neither of the characters is developed. They're given more detail and fleshed out, but they remain pretty much as they were at the beginning of the movie. Now let's take a look at another movie. And you may recognize the scenes here. It's from the 1951 production of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Alastair Sim is the very memorable Scrooge in this movie. And in the first scene, which you'll see in this highlighted slide, here's Scrooge at the beginning of the movie being assisted with his coat by Bob Cratchit, a clerk that he employs in his little business where he loans money to people, much like Potter. And in the same way is very strict about getting it paid back, not really giving people any kinds of terms, not cutting them slack if they can't make the payments, and sending them to debtor's prison, which, frankly, I don't know how they're supposed to raise money if they're in prison, but that was the custom in merry old England. At the left of Scrooge is Bob Cratchit, a poorly paid clerk in his establishment. Cratchit and his family play a big role in the development of Scrooge's character. Now, in this next slide, we see the ghost of Jacob Marley. Scrooge's old partner in his firm, who died 7 years earlier, he comes back as a ghost and pays Scrooge a visit and tells him he'll be visited by 3 spirits that will help him change his thinking about how he should live his life if he should be helpful to other people. In the right-hand scene, we see the ghost of Christmas past. He's the first of the 3 spirits that comes to usher Scrooge through various points in his past and let him revisit those times in his past. It's all part of the development of Scrooge's character. Basically, the 3 visits he gets progressively scare him, make him sad, make him a bit angry, and eventually scare the dickens out of him. Not to make a pun with the author's name. Scare him to show him that he's coming to a very bad end if he continues in the way that he's been living. In the last slide that I'll show you, we see 3 scenes from the end of the movie. In the leftward circled image, you see Scrooge leaning out the window on Christmas morning. He's discovered, first of all, that he's still alive, which he's very thankful for, having just witnessed the visit to a cemetery where he lies buried after his death. But it was all a dream, it seems, or the visitation of the spirit. So he's very happy in the morning. He wakes up, looks out the window, sees a boy down the street, and throws some money to him to go buy a goose and deliver it to Bob Cratchit's place, because he knows on the small amount of money he pays Bob Cratchit, they're not going to have very much of a Christmas dinner. Well, Bob Cratchit also has a sick child named Tiny Tim. In the center picture, we see a very happy Scrooge, happy to give Bob Cratchit a higher salary, which of course is going to help Cratchit's family immensely. But in the last boxed picture we see off to the right, which is taken from the cover of the colorized version of A Christmas Carol, we see Scrooge with Tiny Tim. He's at this point already helped Tim with some medical expenses that Bob couldn't afford, but having paid them, Scrooge is actually the benefactor who results in Tim's continued existence. Tim doesn't die, as we might have thought earlier in the movie, from whatever malady afflicted him. With Scrooge's help, he presumably continues on to have a happy life. So we do see character development here in A Christmas Carol, much different than we did in It's a Wonderful Life. Scrooge is nasty at the beginning and stingy, and by the end of the movie, he's transformed into a generous, kind-hearted soul who does have the welfare of others in his mind. And it's a very warm, fuzzy feeling that we get from this, very much in keeping with the Christmas spirit. This is the end of the slide set. I just want to give you an example of how slides might be presented without any words at all and in a much more interesting way, because you anticipate somebody explaining these things to you, and you have a chance, therefore, to show what you can explain about these pictures. If you can present a slide presentation like this in person, so much the better. If you can't, then you might consider creating narrated slides like this and then posting this in a way that your instructor advises. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Bye-bye.